Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of challenging source material, rip it apart, and deliver the distilled knowledge directly to you. Today, we're strapping in for a deep, maybe often uncomfortable, dive into the mind of a comedic legend and social diagnostician, George Carlin. Our focus is the sheer intellectual potency, the often filthy and always insightful observations drawn from his highly regarded book, When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops? Our mission today is, well, it's bigger than just revisiting the jokes. It's about using Carlin's relentless analysis as a critical lens. We want to extract the core philosophy behind his signature brand of dissent, focusing particularly on his obsession with American language, hypocrisy, and our collective, deliberate avoidance of uncomfortable truths. Carlin, in these pages, is operating as a serious, moral voice. A hilariously angry one, sure, but a moral voice nonetheless.
And that framing of Carlin as the necessary outsider is, I think, essential for understanding the sources. He doesn't just critique the system, he deliberately positions himself outside of it. He makes the point that he's not an outsider by philosophical choice alone. He actually tried the inside. And he found the entire American system, politics, religion, marketing, social interactions, to be so fundamentally repulsive, so rooted in lies and comfort-seeking, that he was forced out by its sheer unpleasantness. He'd rather be in, he suggests, if the system were fundamentally honest.
That's a powerful indictment. It means his cynicism isn't passive, it's an active response to pervasive deceit. He's standing outside the walls of consensus, armed with raw, unfiltered insight and humor, forcing you to look at the uncomfortable realities that the established institutions, the ones he fled, are desperate for us to ignore.
Exactly, and the sources provide us with a pretty cohesive structure for navigating that descent. We are going to explore three primary pillars of Carlin's thought. First, we tackle what he famously called the new language and how the corruption of American speech through, the euphemism epidemic is destroying clear thought. Second, we will dissect his critique of institutional power, examining how religion and politics manipulate consent. And finally, we will look into the cynical mirror, exploring his highly provocative, often brutal observations on gender dynamics, heroism, and the dark inevitability of human mortality.
It's a roadmap built on the principle that if we don't fix the words we use, we can never fix the problems they describe. Let's start there. Okay, let's unpack this with a core idea. Language is being deliberately sabotaged. Carlin dedicates significant attention to the concept of the euphemism. What is his central thesis on why this is an existential problem for American society? Why does it bother him so much beyond just being, a sign of poor communication?
Right. Carlin's central thesis on euphemisms goes right to the heart of American prosperity and maybe anxiety. He argues that euphemistic language doesn't enhance meaning. Its express purpose is to obscure it, to shade the truth, and to replace words that generate discomfort. And he sees Americans, especially the comfortable middle and upper middle class, as having developed a pathological aversion to reality. We can't handle the raw facts of death, waste, or bodily functions.
It's a way of insulating ourselves. We see historical proof of this, even in something as old and accepted as the dinner table. Carlin reminds us that terms like white meat, dark meat, and drumstick weren't just random culinary terms. They arose during the prudish Victorian era.
Precisely. They were mechanisms developed to avoid mentioning certain anatomical references in polite company. Carlin says if you were serving chicken, no one at a formal dinner wanted to hear, "pass the thighs," or worse, "let me have one of those nice juicy breasts." It's an old mechanism for avoiding awkward or vivid reality. But Carlin notes that the mechanism expanded dramatically over time, moving from prudish avoidance of the body to intellectual avoidance of meaning. For him, the turning point when the new language really took hold was when ordinary people, not just academics, started referring to ideas as concepts. That tiny upgrade signaled a massive societal shift toward pretension.
That shift from idea to concept is exactly what feeds into the next major category of complaint, the upgrade of the mundane, this constant quest for artificial importance. I was struck by how Carlin identified the motivation behind this. If you can't make something better, make the word for it sound more impressive.
Yeah, it reflects a collective, aspirational, societal effort to sound more sophisticated, important, and modern than we truly are. Carlin's documentation of the evolution of household items is exhaustive because it's a critique of consumer vanity. Think about the common shifts. Toilet paper, a utility item, became bathroom tissue.
Right.
Loafers, defined by their ease, morphed into slip-ons. Sneakers were upgraded to running shoes, and now you often find them marketed generically as athletic footwear.
And what about the clothing items designed for peak slovenliness? your old, comfortable sweatpants and sweatshirts.
They are now activewear, deserving their own section in the store, implying that the person wearing them is engaged in some high-energy pursuit, even if they're just, binge-watching television. Carlin is pointing out the disconnect between the function and the descriptor.
It's a systemic psychological trick.
Yeah.
And it's not just clothes. He notes that anything that requires maintenance or might remind you of decay also gets a cleanup. False teeth become dental appliances.
Mm-hmm. And a toupee is now a hair appliance, or often a component of a new hair replacement system.
And that word system is the critical linguistic weapon here.
Oh, absolutely. Carlin observes that basic objects gain an artificial layer of importance, complexity, and often expense by simply attaching the word system to the name. Your old answering machine is a voice processing system. Your bed is no longer a mattress, it's a sleep system.
A sleep system.
Yeah. Even simple home tools are elevated. Carlin specifically cites the Clorox Ready Mop, rebranded as America's favorite mopping system.
It suggests the user is managing a complex infrastructure rather than just performing a basic chore. And this system language infiltrates expensive goods, particularly cars. The heater and AC become the climate control system. Brakes are a braking system.
And seatbelts and airbags are now the comprehensive impact management system. This language shifts the perception of the item. It transforms it from a simple mechanical object into a sophisticated, quasi-scientific necessity. But Carlin noted the most egregious example in car advertising, stopping the use of the term car seats and advertising them as having leather seating surfaces.
I see the comedic genius in that, but what's the deeper critique? Why is that detail so offensive to Carlin?
Well, it's the sheer attempt at intellectual elevation. A seat is where you sit. A seating surface sounds architectural, almost geological. It's designed to justify the outrageous price tag and give the consumer a false sense of luxury and importance. Carlin sees it as the ultimate triumph of marketing over reality, forcing people to participate in this pretense because they want the status the language implies.
That quest for importance leads us directly to the workplace, which Carlin analyzes under the category of inflating titles and the depersonalization of work. He views this linguistic inflation as an economic trade-off.
That's the core insight, and it's a profound social critique, really. Companies aren't paying more in real wages, so they compensate in prestige. They pay in inflated self-esteem. A simple store clerk performing basic transactions is instantly elevated to a product specialist, a retail consultant, or a customer service associate.
He notes that fast food workers aren't just staff anymore. They are associates or hospitality representatives, even if their primary job that day is cleaning up spills. Carlin found it genuinely jarring to see a cashier whose name tag identified them as a hospitality representative. It just dilutes the meaning of every word.
And this devaluation through overinflation happens across the economy. Secretaries are now personal assistants or administrative aides. Drummers are not just drummers, they are precision percussionists. Your traditional, trustworthy family doctor becomes a primary care provider. This is not benign. It's driven by the attempt to either boost confidence or maybe justify increased medical costs.
And the most evocative rebranding, the bounty hunter.
Yes. The classic rough-and-tumble fugitive recovery specialist has been sanitized into the highly professional and neutral-sounding recovery agent. Carlin finds the absurdity in taking a job fundamentally based on chasing and capturing people and making it sound like someone who helps you retrieve a lost laptop.
And the restaurant world is a similar minefield of pretension. Waiters becoming servers or waitstaff. Cooks becoming chefs.
Carlin argues waitstaff is an artificially forced term, part of the effort to eliminate the gendered waiter-waitress dichotomy, but it ends up sounding awkward and impersonal. And the obsession with chef devalues the expertise of actual trained chefs. It gives us things like menus offering lunch solutions instead of just lunch, suggesting the patron is experiencing an infrastructural problem that the menu is solving.
We mentioned the food itself can't escape this, specifically the prunes.
The famous example of the California Prune Board. They commissioned research and attempted to change the word prunes to dried plums. Why? Because they found women in their 30s reacted more favorably to the soft, gentle, and less associated with laxatives phrase, dried plums. Carlin observes that this is a microcosm of the entire society. We rename things to avoid any negative, unpleasant, or aging association.
That desire to soften the edges extends beyond marketing and into institutional morality, leading Carlin to take a very harsh look at political correctness. He views PC not as helpful tolerance, but as ugly, restrictive language.
Carlin is scathing. He calls PC America's newest form of intolerance, arguing it's particularly pernicious because it comes disguised as fairness, compassion, and sensitivity. Its real function, in his view, is the restriction and control of language through rigid codes imposed by institutional gatekeepers.
And he says this leads directly to tortured language. The phrase differently abled is his favorite target here.
He finds it linguistically ridiculous because it eliminates all meaning. If you insist on using differently abled, he argues, you must apply it universally. Everyone is differently abled. A world-class chef is differently abled from a champion chess player. Carlin's point is that the phrase provides no distinction or useful description. It exists purely to make the speaker feel good about themselves for having avoided the harsh reality.
But wait, Carlin goes much further than just saying differently abled is clumsy. By suggesting blunt, unvarnished terms like crippled or even defective are preferable, isn't he risking becoming the very thing he critiques? Someone using language to exclude or harm, even if his intent is just honesty? How does he defend that extreme position?
That's where his cynical moralism comes in. Carlin defends it by arguing that crippled is an honorable, honest condition. He points out it appears in the Bible. Jesus healed the cripples. It's an accepted, descriptive term. His push for defective is meant to be shocking, sure, but it's rooted in the idea that we already use birth defect without flinching. Carlin wants the truth no matter how harsh. He believes that by softening the language, we soften the response and we cease to grapple with the actual problem the person faces.
It's a call for semantic discipline. This attempt to avoid blunt truth creates comically distorted terms, particularly in educational jargon. Carlin notes the absurdity of stupid kids being rebranded as minimally exceptional.
Minimally exceptional is peak Carlin absurdity. He contrasts it sharply with the simple, humane explanation, the boy is slow. He asks you to imagine a parent being told their child is minimally exceptional and pretending that provides any helpful information. It's obfuscation disguised as elevated sensitivity.
And the final piece of the PC critique, how it utterly cripples discourse and eliminates the punch of established idioms.
He provides the perfect illustration of linguistic sabotage. The old expression, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. A visceral, powerful metaphor about relative power. Becomes the utterly unwieldy, in the kingdom of the visually impaired, the partially sighted person is fully empowered.
Oh, wow.
It takes a razor-sharp philosophical statement and turns it into meaningless bureaucratic sludge. Carlin argues that when you sterilize the language to this degree, you lose the ability to speak clearly about any reality whatsoever, whether painful or profound.
So if the new language exists to comfort the consumer and boost the clerk's ego, the next logical step Carlin identifies is when institutions weaponize that soft language, not to sell bathroom tissue, but to control behavior, justify power, and manipulate political thought.
That's the transition point, exactly. Carlin takes aim at the establishment, starting with the most destructive institutional mechanism, manufacturing consent for war. He uses a chilling historical source to set the frame, the observation made by Hermann Goering at the Nuremberg trials.
Goering's quote is devastatingly cynical because it reveals the simple, timeless formula for military mobilization.
Yeah, Goering confessed, of course the people don't want war. But after all, it's the leaders of the country who determine the policy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to greater danger. Carlin uses this to show that institutional control is not subtle. It's based on two tools: fear, claiming imminent attack, and shaming, denouncing critics as unpatriotic.
And this ties back to his personal philosophy of being an outsider. He feels forced to stay outside a system that operates on such transparently cynical, manufactured fear and deliberate lies.
Precisely, and the lies are often sanctified, especially by the media. Carlin finds it hypocritical that the institutional media shows such wildly unequal treatment toward different belief systems. Take, for example, UFO believers. They're marginalized, dismissed as buffs, and treated as cooks, confined to late-night fringe programming.
Yet, Carlin argues, there is comparable, or perhaps more tangible, evidence for UFOs, citing taped sightings, documented radar evidence, and multiple eyewitness accounts.
Now compare that to the belief in an invisible supreme being who inhabits the sky, one who controls the universe, punishes and rewards, and dictates morality through ancient texts. That belief system is treated as worthy, upright, credible, and its adherents are considered the backbone of society. Carlin suggests that if the media were truly fair, they would describe the entire Jesus Messiah, Son of God story as nothing more than a rather fanciful tale. The institutional acceptance of one fantasy over another demonstrates where the system's true allegiance lies, with organized power structures, not objective truth.
And that institutional acceptance of religious power leads directly into his famous dismantling of the Ten Commandments. Carlin sees that ancient list as a clear political document, artificially inflated for marketing purposes.
Carlin's question is simple. Why 10? Why not 9 or 7? He concludes it was purely a marketing decision. 10 sounds official, authoritative, and psychologically satisfying, like the top 10 list. He argues that 11 wouldn't have sounded as serious, and 9 is just boring. It was a hustle designed to control primitive people by giving them a rule book that sounded important.
He starts his reduction by immediately throwing out the first 3 commandments in the Catholic tradition, about having strange gods, taking the Lord's name in vain, and keeping the Sabbath holy.
He dismisses them as pure bullshit, spooky language designed only to control the thoughts and time of the populace. He asserts they have zero rational application for intelligent, civilized humans in the 21st century. That gets us immediately down to 7. The next on the chopping block is honor thy father and mother.
That's tossed out because it's a device for controlling people and promoting automatic, unearned respect for authority, the first authority figures you meet. Carlin insists that respect must be earned, not automatically granted, simply based on biological relation or performance of the parent. Respecting a bad parent is illogical and serves only the institution trying to enforce obedience.
Okay, now for the combinations. He sees thou shalt not steal and thou shalt not bear false witness as covering the same core behavior, dishonesty. So those two combine into one simple rule. Thou shalt not be dishonest. We're down to 5.
And he similarly pairs, thou shalt not commit adultery, with the arguably more psychological offense, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife.
He pairs them because they both prohibit marital infidelity, though he has a fascinating argument about coveting. He notes that coveting happens in the mind and you shouldn't outlaw fantasizing. But fidelity is a rational choice for social stability, so they combine to, thou shalt not be unfaithful. We're down to 4.
And if you apply further logic, honesty and fidelity are arguably parts of the same overall value. Perhaps combine all 4 honesty-fidelity points into one positive statement. Thou shalt always be honest and faithful. But Carlin leaves the core acts separate for simplicity.
Right. Now, what about coveting the neighbor's goods? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. Carlin throws this out entirely, declaring it just plain stupid. Why? Because coveting is the engine of the entire consumer economy.
That's where the cynical economic insight comes in.
Yeah. If your neighbor buys a new sleep system or a luxury vehicle, Carlin says, the natural human reaction is to want one too. That desire that coveting creates jobs, drives manufacturing, and supports the whole commercial enterprise. He argues, leave coveting alone, it's keeping us employed.
So after all the cutting and combining, Carlin is left with one original major commandment, thou shalt not kill. And he proposes one new, absolutely vital addition for the modern institutional era.
His final definitive 2 commandments are, thou shalt not kill, and the crucial addition, thou shalt keep thy religion to thyself. This is the ultimate summary of Carlin's social priorities, stopping physical violence and stopping the institutional meddling and moralizing that he sees as the cause of so much social dysfunction.
That critique of institutional meddling extends directly into the heart of politics, where Carlin sees language not just as padding, but as a deliberate tactical tool for avoidance and accountability dodging.
Political language is the absolute art of evasion. Carlin outlines a predictable 4-stage sequence of defense that every politician in trouble follows, regardless of party. Stage 1, miscommunication. They deny the intent of the words, claiming they were taken out of context.
Stage 2, escalation of denial. As evidence mounts and the contest becomes clearer, the politician shifts the blame away from the seriousness of the act. The whole thing has been blown out of proportion.
Stage 3, public relations jujitsu. They pivot from defense to offense, positioning themselves as advocates for transparency. We're trying to get to the bottom of this so we can get the facts out to the American people. This allows them to control the narrative while appearing dedicated to truth.
And then comes the truly sophisticated, sublime, passive voice of guilt. Mistakes were made.
Oh, that phrase is a masterpiece of political speech. Carlin identifies its genius in that it avoids identifying the mistake maker. It implies some bad luck, some systemic failure, or perhaps voodoo caused the error, not personal culpability. Carlin notes this usually precedes the final stage, where the politician in full retreat says, I just want to put this thing behind me and get on with my life.
This pattern of evasion is constant, even in daily operations. Carlin notes politicians don't work in government. They are serving the nation and providing public service. Problems are always sanitized into challenges.
And their actions are always positive and forward-looking, even if nothing is accomplished. They implement initiatives or proposals to move the process forward. Notice how vague and active that language is, masking the often sluggish reality of bureaucracy. They sound busy without having achieved anything concrete.
And when actual conflict arises, the patriotism lingo kicks into overdrive, specifically with how we talk about soldiers. Carlin tracks the shift in military references.
During peacetime, they are neutral, our young men and women. But the moment conflict begins, the emotional volume is dialed up immediately. They become our brave young fighting men and women stationed halfway around the world in places whose names they can't pronounce.
They intentionally insert sons and daughters for maximum emotional effect and personal connection with the voters. But Carlin highlights a particularly insidious detail in that phrase: the subtle racism of claiming the average American can't find on a map where these places are.
It's an interesting critique, isn't it? The politician is simultaneously lauding the soldiers for their bravery while subtly casting doubt on the geographic intelligence of the constituents whose votes they need. Carlin finds the irony delicious. The politician needs the limited intelligence of the average American to survive, and yet they're comfortable pointing out that limitation in the same breath as praising the military sacrifice.
Finally, political interest groups are the undisputed masters of strategic rebranding and naming wars. Carlin highlights several examples where a simple name change completely shifts the moral calculus of a debate.
The list is instructive. Religious groups become faith-based. Anti-abortion is replaced by the positive-sounding pro-life. No one wants to be anti-anything. You must be pro-something.
And the tax examples are genius in their calculated emotional weight. The inheritance tax, which sounds clinical, morphed into the neutral estate tax, but the anti-tax groups won the day with the emotionally charged term, the death tax.
That phrase is brilliant because it implies the government is taxing the act of dying itself. Similarly, liberals avoid spending, calling it investing or funding,
Right.
and the language of conflict is equally distorted. Carlin cites the pro-gun community's description of gun control legislation as victim disarmament.
Wow.
He notes that phrase is stunning. It takes your breath away because it so efficiently reframes a regulatory attempt as an act of calculated violence against the victim. Carlin's ultimate point here is that words are not neutral tools. They are weapons, carefully engineered and deployed by the powerful to maintain their power and win political wars.
Carlin, having thoroughly examined the institutional facade and the corruption of language, now turns the cynical mirror back on human nature itself, starting with perhaps his most provocative and controversial analysis: the battle of the sexes.
He reduces the entire complicated dynamic between men and women into a brutal, efficient equation. Women are crazy, men are stupid. And crucially, he provides the causal link. The main reason women are crazy is that men are stupid. This isn't just a joke, it's a thesis on biological burden and social imposition.
He argues that women are simply handed a much heavier set of obligations in life's big cosmic cafeteria. He details the sheer volume of biological and physical burdens unique to women.
The list is comprehensive and, well, painful. It starts with periods and PMS, which Carlin notes men only perceive as a problem because it affects them indirectly. Then you have pap smears, mammograms, the genuine, often devastating pain of childbirth, the permanent physical changes like stretch marks, and eventually the turbulent hormonal roller coaster of menopause. Carlin's argument is that the female experience is physically demanding and often painful, purely due to biology.
But on top of the physical reality, there's the massive socially imposed toll of the constant mandate to look good all the time. This involves a staggering, expensive arsenal of products and procedures.
The detail he goes into here is critical because it illustrates the social cost of the female burden. He lists the overwhelming array of products required: cleansers, toners, foundation, blush, lip products, various eye makeup applications, nail polish, fake fingernails, fake eyelashes,
That's a lot.
and an endless array of specialized creams: face, neck, eye, thigh, and foot. We haven't even gotten to lotions, gels, bath beads, exfoliants, depilatories, and facial masks.
It's an exhausting financial and temporal commitment just to participate in society. And then there's the clothing required, the bewildering layers of garments and specialized undergarments.
Right. The list of required female garments reveals the complexity of dressing in a way that meets the social mandate. Slips, half-slips, camisoles, various socks, garter belts, corsets, and the immense variety of specialized bras. Training, padded, sports, push-up, strapless, wonder bras, bustiers, camisoles, teddies, petticoats. Carlin frames the female existence as navigating a massive, lifelong, expensive performance of beauty and conformity, which he argues is a major source of the crazy factor.
So women are burdened and therefore crazy. But what about men? Carlin labels them stupid, asserting that their only real problem is other men.
The male disease is rooted in this fundamental stupidity, the pathological need to be full of shit constantly. This manifests as a refusal to admit ignorance, a refusal to ask for help, the insistence that they can fix any mechanical or logistical problem, and the desperate need to always be in charge. Men measure their worth through external tangible factors: the size of their guns, their cars, their wallets, and their dicks. All competitive metrics no man can consistently win, leading to constant low-level hostility and anxiety.
And he traces this male hostility and stupidity back to a biological inferiority complex, noting the difference between creating lice and ending it.
This is perhaps Carlin's deepest, most cynical biological observation. He suggests men are modified females, noting that all human fetuses begin as female and the brain is fundamentally female until hormones act on it. Men, therefore, are defined by their biological modification and exclusion from the central creative event of life reproduction. As a result, they are left with the shitty job of ending life. War, crime, violence, and general destructive impulses are primarily male franchises. This exclusion and modification, he suggests, explains the stupidity, the hostility, and the desperate need to constantly prove worth through dominance and destruction.
That brings us to Carlin's relentless focus on human fragility and mortality. His humor often contains a morbid, unvarnished edge, forcing us to face the potential for devastation.
You see it in his holiday message, which starts with traditional good wishes, only to immediately pivot to a detailed list of horrifying things that will happen next year: death, crippling, incurable diseases, horrible scarring, robberies, and rapes. He concludes by offering the grim advice: so just try to do the best you can. It's the application of unfiltered reality to the saccharine sentiment of the holiday season.
This dark view extends to his satirical reality TV concepts, mocking the human impulse to watch suffering.
He imagined a show called Guess Who's for Dinner, set on a barren island where people are starved, half of them large and aggressive, half small and weak to see who eats whom. He questioned if the producers should provide utensils.
Good grief.
And the truly unsettling Maniac on Drugs, where a homicidal maniac's given assault rifles and large amounts of various hard drugs, crack, speed, acid, PCP, then allowed to drive around New York City while being videotaped. The finale, of course, involves turning them loose at Disney World with rocket-propelled grenades. It's a hyper-cynical view of entertainment as voyeuristic cruelty.
Even smooth, ordinary life contains the potential for Carlin's brand of immediate, random devastation. He recounts the perfect, flawless flight scenario in detail: smooth check-in, an empty seat next to him, attractive flight attendants, perfect takeoff, only for the plane to then go into a steep dive and crash, killing all but 2 of the passengers.
This anecdote serves to highlight the illusion of safety and control. He argues the standard flight safety instructions are criminally inadequate. He suggests they should include graphic descriptions of the devastating physical damage done to the human body during a crash, citing examples of anatomical mutilations and the damage from intense smoke inhalation. He believes people deserve the brutal truth, not reassuring euphemisms about exiting the aircraft calmly.
The sources ground this dark humor in the real world, horrifying statistics about landmines, bringing the focus back to preventable institutional tragedies.
The numbers are staggering and unforgettable. 110 million landmines scattered across 72 countries, with 75 exploding every single day, maiming or killing approximately 700 people a month. The economic contrast Carlin highlights is what truly makes the institutional indifference apparent. Mines cost $3 to make, but $100 to remove, and it would take 1,100 years to clear them all at the current rate. He emphasizes the human cost in Cambodia, where 1 out of every 236 civilians is missing a limb or an eye due to these devices. This is the reality the system tries to euphemize.
And when tragedy strikes, Carlin doesn't let the language of grief escape scrutiny. He challenges the definitions we use to cope, specifically heroism and the idea of tragedy.
His critique of the post-9/11 hero debate is a classic example of his demand for linguistic precision. He directly challenges the Port Authority's claim that every person who died, stock traders, clerks, receptionists, and cooks, died for their country. Carlin asserts they died simply because they went to work that day.
So who does Carlin reserve the title for? The police and firemen?
Exactly. The true heroes, in Carlin's definition, were those who risked or lost their lives trying to rescue people. He insists that heroism requires choice and conscious risk-taking for the benefit of others. If every victim is a hero, the word is linguistically meaningless. He sarcastically predicts that if this linguistic inflation continues, we will soon need to invent new terms like mega-hero or hyper-hero to distinguish the truly brave from the general population.
He applies the same scrutiny to the language of collective grief, specifically the cliches, "let the healing begin," and the search for closure.
Carlin argues those are comforting lies. There is never any true healing or closure, only a necessary pause before the next horrifying event. Wounds, physical and psychological, leave permanent scars that merely fade slightly over time. He states the appropriate, honest phrase should be, "let the scarring begin."
Oof.
It's brutal honesty aimed at preventing society from pretending that severe trauma is something easily overcome.
And finally, his correction of the term suicide bomber reflects his focus on motive and institutional euphemism, even when describing acts of violence.
Carlin corrects the common language, arguing that these individuals are anything but suicidal in the traditional clinical sense. A person who commits suicide feels their life is worthless, hopeless, and they are seeking an escape from pain. These bombers, conversely, feel their lives are incredibly valuable, and by giving them up, they make a powerful political or religious statement and further a deeply held cause.
Carlin notes that the bombers themselves use a euphemism for the act, calling it a sacred explosion.
Which confirms his point. They intentionally end their own lives in the process of killing others, making the self-destruction a means to an end, not the end itself. Carlin argues the term suicide bomber is misleading because it confuses the act with the ultimate purpose, self-sacrifice for a cause. If we use the wrong language, we fail to understand the terrifying motive.
Speaking of linguistic inflation and arbitrary privilege, Carlin concludes his observations by critiquing the American obsession with the handicap system, particularly at the airport.
He acknowledges the positive outcomes, specifically the handy blue parking spaces, which he notes are indeed mighty handy for those who need them. But he focuses his complaint on the privilege of early boarding on planes, arguing it's fundamentally unfair for people to board ahead of him just because they've had a run of bad luck. Carlin wants bad luck to apply universally and equally.
And he expresses suspicion about the integrity of the system itself, questioning the extent of the actual disability.
He finds the parade of wheelchairs, specifically the airline-provided ones, suspect, expressing his suspicion that there is a fairly hefty amount of bullshitting happening at the check-in counter regarding who is truly handicapped, noting that some of the people don't look that fucked up. It's a cynical jab at the American tendency to exploit any available loophole for minor advantage.
But Carlin's cynicism always finds a point of equilibrium, a leveling effect that satisfies him.
Yeah, he concludes that he isn't that upset about the early boarders because of the great equalizer of air travel. They always get off last. While the early boarders, now the last ones off, are searching for their carry-on bags and perhaps those aforementioned rectal thermometers, Carlin is already halfway into town. He sums it up perfectly. Life has a way of evening things out. Hashtag tag outro me.
That concept, life always evening things out, often in surprising and dark ways, brings us to the culmination of Carlin's relentless analysis. Whether he's tracking the inflation of a store clerk's title, dismantling the Ten Commandments, or deconstructing the terminology around tragedy, his genius lies in demonstrating how language is used not just to communicate fact, but primarily to manipulate, control, and avoid uncomfortable realities about mortality, power, and social conflict.
Carlin was obsessed with stripping away the protective layers of words that Americans have built around themselves to feel comfortable, fat, and prosperous. He demanded that we acknowledge that we are easily led, prone to massive self-deception, and that the institutions we rely on are fundamentally cynical about our intelligence.
And if we look at his ultimate view on human agency, it's brutally fatalistic. He states that life is fundamentally simple. Your happiness is based completely on luck and genetics. And even genetics, he notes, is merely a component of luck. It eliminates personal responsibility as a major factor.
It's the ultimate statement of cynical fatalism. If Carlin is correct, if language is perpetually corrupted, if institutions are rigged to maintain power through fear and euphemism, and if our individual happiness is merely a lottery of luck and DNA, then how much of our perceived control over our own lives, our careers, and our moral choices is simply another pleasing euphemism we tell ourselves to avoid the terrifying truth that we are fundamentally powerless? That's the heavy, provocative thought Carlin leaves us with.
A truly unsettling but necessary deep dive into the rhetoric of dissent. We encourage you to continue applying Carlin's critical listening to the language you hear every day, because if you don't pay attention to the words, the system will keep moving the process forward, implementing initiatives, and giving you a highly specialized assessment, even though you just asked for the time. We hope this has been enlightening for you.